The suspect in this weekend's mass shooting in Arizona is a young man named Jared Lee Loughner. Jared Lee Loughner was born on September 10th, 1988. When he was 3 years old, a 35-year-old man barreled his pickup truck through the window of a Luby's fast food restaurant in Killeen, Texas. He opened fire on a crowd of people who were eating lunch there, and when it was over, he had shot and killed 23 people and wounded 20 others. A year and a half later, 55-year-old businessman in San Francisco walked into an office building at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, took the elevator up to the 34th floor, and shot and killed 8 people working at a law office before turning the gun on himself. 4.5 years after that, 2 young boys armed with guns, an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. They shot and killed 4 girls and a teacher and wounded 10 others at their own middle school in Jonesboro, Arkansas. The spring after that, in Littleton, Colorado, 2 students at Columbine High School shot and killed 12 of their classmates, 1 of their teachers, and wounded 26 others before killing themselves in the school's library. 3 months later, a 44-year-old Georgia day trader went to the offices of 2 separate day trading firms in Atlanta. Armed with 2 guns, he opened fire inside. 9 people were shot and killed before the gunman later shot himself. A few years later, in March 2005, a 44-year-old man walked into a church service in Brookfield, Wisconsin, brandishing a 9mm handgun. The man shot and killed the minister and 6 other people before killing himself. Just 9 days after that, a 16-year-old boy in nearby Red Lake, Minnesota, shot and killed his grandfather and his grandfather's girlfriend. Then he walked to the local high school where he shot and killed 5 students and a teacher and a security guard, 9 dead in all. 10 months after that, 10 months later, a former U.S. postal worker in California walks into the mail processing plant that she used to work at. Armed only with a pistol, she shot and killed 7 employees and then turned the gun on herself. 9 months after that, a 32-year-old man shot and killed 5 school-age girls at an Amish school in rural Pennsylvania. Then he killed himself. 4 months later, an 18-year-old in Salt Lake City, Utah, walks into a local mall, opens fire, killing 5 and wounding 4 others before he was shot and killed by police. 9 weeks after that, it was a normal start to a weekday at Virginia Tech when a 23-year-old mentally disturbed Virginia Tech student roamed the campus, killing 32 people and then himself, the single deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. 8 months after that, a 19-year-old walks into a shopping mall in Omaha, Nebraska. He shoots and kills 8 people and wounds 4 others in the span of 6 minutes before killing himself. 2 months after that, another U.S. college campus, Northern Illinois University. A former student walks into a lecture hall there, opens fire. 5 students shot and killed, 18 others wounded. A year later, the scene was an immigrant community center in upstate New York. A 41-year-old man shoots and kills 11 people attending the center, plus 2 of the center's employees, before then killing himself. 7 months after that, an Army psychiatrist walks onto an Army base in Fort Hood, Texas. 13 people shot and killed, 30 others wounded. And then this weekend, in Tucson, Arizona, a 22-year-old man whose photo we have for you, he allegedly shot and killed 16 people, including a federal judge, and wounded 14 others, including a U.S. congresswoman who was apparently the target of his attack. After the horrible familiarity of yet another American gun massacre, the reaction to it was also horribly familiar.
It's an unbelievable tragedy that the people of Arizona experienced today. One of which, of course, in our worst nightmares, we would never could have imagined would have taken place.
And one more note about this unimaginable tragedy that we've been covering since first word of it arrived on Monday. How do you recover from the emotional trauma of what happened on that campus?
I was one of probably the first 25 or 30 people out of the room, and I can't believe it happened.
In the peaceful Amish community of horse-drawn carriages and farmland, crime is rare, this crime unimaginable.
It is hard for anybody to find the words to express the horror and the grief and the anger that are the only rational responses to massacres like this. But the one thing that events like this are not in America now is inconceivable or unimaginable. the list of mass shootings that I just referenced, this is a partial list. This is a list that I arbitrarily limited to this time period that this alleged killer in this case has been alive. And I arbitrarily excluded, just for time, dozens of other multiple gun murders in our country during that same period. As of 2007, the second most heavily armed society in the world, the second most, was the nation of Yemen. Remember, like Al-Qaeda in Somalia and Yemen? Yemen, the second most heavily armed nation in the world. For every 100 people in Yemen, there are 61 guns. Here in the United States, for every 100 people, there are 90 guns. We are the undisputed number one most heavily armed country in the world, and we hold that title by a mile. Every year, more than 30,000 Americans are shot to death. That works out to 82 people every day. Most of those shootings are suicides, which of course begs the question, how many of those people would have successfully killed themselves if they were using something other than a gun to try to get the job done? 30,000 Americans killed every year by guns. Every year, 200,000 Americans are wounded by gunfire. That's 547 people every single day. This is not leading up to me making some big point about the Second Amendment. The fact is, we are a country of about 308 million people, and there are probably about 270 million guns in this country. That's where we are right now. Given that, each new American gun massacre is both singularly horrific in its own way, and it is insane not to acknowledge that it is part of a very clear, very frequently repeating pattern. Every time this happens, we look for answers and explanations and lessons in the specifics of the particular case. In this case, the potential mental illness of the alleged shooter, the effort to try to find some political coherence in what appear to be his beliefs, the effort to figure out whether it was his beliefs that motivated the shooting, what exactly this killer was armed with, how exactly he was stopped, whether this could have been foretold by anything in his life. We look to these details. And as we learn more facts about this one latest American gun massacre, what is consuming the national debate at this moment is whether the heated political rhetoric in our country was a contributing factor to it. But whether political rhetoric motivated this kid or not, whether this kid was sane enough to process political rhetoric as sane people understand it or not, whether we will understand sooner or later or never the exact motivation behind this kid, behind this latest American gun massacre, here's the question. Do we have any tools to stop the next American gun massacre? Do we have any idea how to stop this disaster? Joining us now is Sheriff Edgar Domenech. He was the special agent in charge of the Washington office of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives at the time of the Virginia Tech massacre. Mr. Domenech is now New York City Sheriff. Thank you for your time tonight, sir.
Thank you, Rachel.
One of the things that we learned today about this case is that the suspected shooter appears to have bought the ammunition just hours before the shooting at a Walmart. How important, from a law enforcement perspective, do you think it is to understand exactly what he was armed with in order to understand how much harm he was able to do?
Well, I think the key here is he was in possession of high-capacity magazines, which allowed him to carry a lot more ammunition than the magazine that he purchased the Glock with. So he was able to have up to, I believe, those 33 rounds of ammunition in that firearm, which means, in layman's term, is that he could shoot 33 rounds before he would have to reload, or if he had used the magazine that had been provided with the gun, which is either going to be 12 rounds or 15 rounds. If we look at the situation, that meant he would have had to reload sooner, and maybe we could have averted the 14 people who were wounded and the 6 people who were tragically killed, because this is an American tragedy.
I understand that the Glock handgun that he used is a popular weapon in law enforcement. The kind of extended magazine that he had holding 30 or more rounds, is that the sort of thing that would be, you as a law enforcement officer, were you ever issued a magazine of that capacity? Is that normal?
No, it's not normal. I was a federal special agent with ATF for 25 and a half years. The standard issued magazine that I carried was 12 rounds and run in the chamber. So as a law enforcement federal agent, the maximum capacity I had with my service revolver was 13 rounds. Now, we did have federal agents who had a critical need. They would have an extended magazine, like with our special response team members. But traditionally, And most law enforcement agencies do not have extended magazines as common issuance to their law enforcement officers. So you have to say, if your line of first defense, which is your law enforcement community, doesn't have the extended magazine capability, why does the general public need to have that without some checks and balance?
To what degree are sales of various sizes of magazines for weapons like this and semi-automatic weapons like this regulated by federal law right now? And how has that changed over the last 15 years or so?
Well, prior to 2004, from 1994 to 2004, there was, in fact, a ban on certain assault weapon firearms, as well as high-capacity or extended magazines. That law sunset in 2004, which means that after 2004, it now became perfectly legal to sell and possess those type of magazines, which the gentleman had on Saturday.
After the Virginia Tech shootings in 2007, I know that President Bush signed a law making it illegal for anybody who had been determined to be mentally ill to purchase a firearm. Mr. Loeffner, as far as we can tell, was never flagged by the system, even though his community college appears to have kicked him out on mental health grounds. There are reports that the Army rejected his application because of drug use. Should he have been able to buy that Glock, that extended magazine, that ammunition under current law as you understand it?
Under current law, he fell in between the cracks and the gaps. And that's part of the problem here when we're talking about the issue of gun violence. And this is something that the Mayors Against Illegal Guns are really trying to focus in to have that discussion about. It's apparent that his school community was concerned about his behavior. I understand reports have it that he tried to enlist in the U.S. Army and was denied because there was an issue of drug usage. And there was also many reports indicating that he was, in fact, a drug user. Now, one of the questions that are used on the form when you fill out for firearm and from a federal firearms licensee is the issue, are you a drug user? It's a self-reporting issue. There's no way to checks and balance, and law enforcement doesn't have the resources nor are the databases integrated to such a level that that type of information would have denied the gentleman from purchasing the firearm in November.
Big picture, have we learned anything from Virginia Tech, from these other massacres? Have we learned anything that we can do in terms of policy to make a difference, or in terms of law enforcement practice, or in terms of what we expect from one another as a culture?
No, we need to have an adult conversation about proper gun ownership. And Mayors Against Illegal Guns is one of the forums that is out there presently that's trying to have that dialogue and that conversation. And the American people deserve that conversation without the emotion. Being present during the Virginia Tech massacre, being the special agent in charge, I saw firsthand what can happen with senseless violence. And this tragic event is an American tragedy that took place on Saturday. And I think it's time for all of us to realize we need to have that conversation, and we need to do it without the emotion. And we need to do it with the understanding that there has to be proper gun ownership and responsibility in order for us to be a safe America.
New York City Sheriff Edgar Domenech, former ATF special agent in charge during the Virginia Tech massacre. Thank you for helping us with this insight tonight, sir. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel.
14 people were wounded this Saturday at Congresswoman Gifford's event in Tucson. 6 people were killed. Among those killed were Phyllis Schneck and Christina Taylor Greene. Ms. Schneck, a retiree, was a churchgoer and a quilter. She's a lifelong Republican who had taken a liking to her Democratic congresswoman. Christina Taylor Greene was interested in politics. She had recently been elected to the student council at her elementary school, which is why a neighbor took her to see Congresswoman Gifford speak on Saturday morning. Phyllis Schneck was 79 years old. Christina Taylor Greene was 9.